Waitress working double shifts gets a life-changing tip from Ronaldo. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. In a city that never slept, with a hustle and bustle drowned out the struggles of the everyday person, Clara rushed between tables at a small, run-down diner. The young waitress, barely out of her teens, had been working double shifts for as long as she could remember, desperately trying to make ends meet. Clara's life was a constant battle. She was the sole breadwinner for her small family, working tirelessly to support her younger brother's education. Dreams of a better future for him kept her going, even when the exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But Clara never let her fatigue show. She greeted every customer with a warm smile and kind words, a beacon of light in a world that often felt cold and uncaring. As she wiped down a table, preparing for the next wave of customers, Clara couldn't help but wince. Her feet ached, her back was sore, and her hands were chapped from the endless dishes. But she didn't have the luxury of rest. Every penny counted, and she needed this job. The diner's owner, Mr. Vasquez, was a ruthless man. He exploited his employees, underpaying them and enforcing harsh working conditions. He believed himself untouchable, king in his small domain. Clara had seen him mock and belittle other waitresses, crushing their spirits with his cruel words. She lived in constant fear of drawing his ire. As she hurried to greet a new customer who had just entered, Clara didn't realize that this particular patron would change her life forever. For the man who had just sat down in her section, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, was none other than Cristiano Ronaldo, the world-famous football star. Cristiano Ronaldo was in town for a charity event, a rare break from his hectic schedule. He had chosen this small, out-of-the-way diner precisely because it was unlikely he would be recognized here. He just wanted a quiet meal, a moment of normalcy in a life that was often anything but. As Clara approached his table, menu in hand, Ronaldo couldn't help but notice the weariness in her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. But despite this, she greeted him with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome to Marty's Diner," she said, her voice friendly despite the fatigue. "What can I get for you today?" Ronaldo returned her smile, charmed by her warmth in the face of obvious adversity. "I'll have a coffee, please. And maybe one of those famous apple pies I see in the display case." Clara nodded, jotting down his order. "Coming right up, sir." As she walked away, Ronaldo couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about this waitress. He had met countless people in his life, but few had radiated such quiet strength and resilience. Behind the counter, Mr. Vasquez was watching Clara with a sneer. "Look at her," he muttered to one of the cooks, "thinking she's something special. She'll never be more than a lowly waitress." The cook shifted uncomfortably, not wanting to agree, but also fearful of disagreeing with his boss. Vasquez continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "She's got dreams, you know. Wants to send her brother to college. As if someone like her could ever achieve something like that." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "She'll be stuck here forever, just like the rest of us. And the sooner she learns that, the better." Clara, unaware of the cruel words being spoken about her, continued her shift with her usual grace and professionalism. She served Ronaldo his coffee and pie with a smile, never once suspecting that she was in the presence of greatness. But Ronaldo noticed everything. He saw the way Vasquez looked at Clara, the contempt in his eyes. He saw the other waitresses, tired and downtrodden, flinching whenever Vasquez walked by. And he saw Clara, a beacon of kindness in a sea of cruelty, never wavering despite the hardships she faced. In that moment, Ronaldo made a decision. He would do something to help this remarkable young woman, to show her that her kindness and hard work had not gone unnoticed. He just didn't know yet how much his simple act would change everything. As the night wore on, Clara's exhaustion grew. Her feet throbbed, her head ached, and the endless stream of customers seemed to blur together. But she pushed on, knowing that every tip, every penny, brought her one step closer to her dream of sending her brother to college. Ronaldo watched her throughout the evening, marveling at her resilience. He saw how she treated every customer with the same warmth and respect, no matter how rude or demanding they were. He saw how she remained calm and composed, even when the orders were piling up and the kitchen was in chaos. But he also saw the toll it was taking on her. He noticed the way her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee, the way she had to brace herself against the counter when she thought no one was looking. Ronaldo's heart went out to her. He knew what it was like to work hard, to push yourself to the brink of exhaustion in pursuit of a dream. But he also knew that no one should have to suffer like this, especially not someone as kind and deserving as Clara. As the diner finally began to empty out, Ronaldo knew it was time to act. He called Clara over, asking for his check. Clara hurried over, apology already on her lips. "I'm so sorry for the wait, sir. It's been a hectic night." Ronaldo waved off her apology. "No worries at all. You've been wonderful." He paused, looking at her intently. "I have to ask, though, why do you do it? Why work so hard in such difficult conditions?" Clara was taken aback by the question. Customers didn't usually take an interest in her life, but something about this man's kind eyes and gentle demeanor made her want to open up. "It's for my brother," she said softly. "He's a bright kid, really smart. I want to give him a chance at a better life. A chance to go to college, to be something more than me." She looked down, suddenly embarrassed. "I know it sounds silly. A waitress with big dreams. But I have to try." For him, Ronaldo was deeply moved. "It's not silly at all," he said firmly. "It's admirable. Your brother is lucky to have you." Clara blinked back sudden tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." Ronaldo signed his check, adding a tip that made Clara's eyes widen. It was more than she usually made in a week. "Sir, this is too much," she protested. "I can't accept this." But Ronaldo just smiled. "You deserve it," he said simply, "for all your hard work and kindness. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your dreams are silly. Keep fighting for them." With that, he stood and left, leaving a stunned Clara holding the check. She stared at the amount, hardly able to believe it was real. But as she tucked it carefully into her pocket, she felt a sudden surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her dreams weren't so impossible after all. The next day, Claire arrived at the diner with a newfound spring in her step. The generous tip from the kind stranger had lifted a weight off her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. But her good mood was short-lived. As soon as she stepped into the diner, she could feel the tension in the air. Mr. Vasquez was on a rampage, his face red with anger as he berated one of the other waitresses. "You call this clean?" he shouted, waving a plate in the poor girl's face. "I've seen cleaner dishes in a pigsty. Do it again, and do it right this time." The waitress scurried away, tears in her eyes. Clara's heart went out to her, but she knew better than to intervene. Drawing Vasquez's ire would only make things worse. As she tied on her apron and started her shift, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Vasquez seemed to be in a particularly foul mood, snapping at everyone and finding fault with even the smallest things. Midway through her shift, Clara was cleaning a table when she overheard Vasquez talking to one of the cooks. "Did you hear about the big shot who was in here last night?" Vasquez was saying. "Left a huge tip, apparently. Probably thought he was being generous, throwing his money around." The cook nodded, looking impressed. But Vasquez's next words made Clara's blood run cold. "Well, too bad for the waitress. Because that tip? It's mine now. No way I'm letting some lowly server walk away with that kind of cash." Clara felt like she had been punched in the gut. The tip from the kind stranger, the money she had been counting on to help pay for her brother's school books. Vasquez was going to steal it. She wanted to confront him, to demand that he give her what was rightfully hers. But she knew it would be useless. Vasquez held all the power, and he knew it. If she spoke up, she could lose her job. And then where would she be? Fighting back tears of frustration and anger, Clara resumed her work. But the hope that had bloomed in her chest just hours before had withered, replaced by a familiar sense of despair. It seemed that no matter how hard she tried, no matter how much she sacrificed, the world was determined to keep her down. And there was nothing she could do about it. Or so she thought. What Clara didn't know was that her story was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would change everything. Cristiano Ronaldo couldn't stop thinking about the hardworking waitress from the diner. Clara's story, her selflessness and determination in the face of such adversity, had touched him deeply. He had seen a lot in his life, met countless people from all walks of life. But there was something about Clara that stood out, a quiet strength and dignity that shone through despite the hardship she faced. Ronaldo knew he had to do something more to help her. The tip he had left, generous as it was, felt insufficient in the face of the systemic injustice she was up against. He made some calls, pulling some strings with a charity he was in town to support. He wanted to find a way to truly make a difference in Clara's life, to give her the break she so desperately deserved. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Clara was nearing the end of another grueling shift. Her feet ached, her head throbbed, and the weight of Vasquez's cruelty sat heavy on her shoulders. As she was clearing a table, Vasquez approached her, a smug look on his face. "Clara, a word," he said, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. Clara followed him to the back, her heart pounding. She knew whatever Vasquez had to say, it wouldn't be good. "It's come to my attention," Vasquez began, "that you received a rather substantial tip last night from a certain high-profile customer." Clara's eyes widened. How did he know? She had been so careful to keep the money hidden, to not draw attention to it. Vasquez's smile was cruel. "As your employer, it's my right to collect and distribute all tips as I see fit. And I've decided that this particular tip will be better used elsewhere. So, if you'll just hand it over." He held out his hand expectantly. Clara felt like she couldn't breathe. This money, this lifeline she had been clinging to, was about to be ripped away from her. But before she could respond, before she could even begin to process what was happening, a voice spoke up from behind her. "I don't think so, Mr. Vasquez." Clara spun around, her jaw dropping. There, standing in the doorway, was the kind stranger from last night. But he wasn't a stranger anymore. Because standing before her, his face set in determination, was none other than Cristiano Ronaldo. The diner fell silent, everyone staring in shock at the football superstar standing in their midst. For a moment, even Vasquez seemed at a loss for words. But Ronaldo didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to Vasquez, his eyes flashing with anger. "I left that tip for Clara," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It belongs to her, not to you." Vasquez's face reddened, his shock quickly turning to indignation. "Now listen here," he blustered. "I don't care who you are. In my establishment, I decide what happens with the tips. And I say..." But Ronaldo cut him off. "No, you listen. I've seen how you treat your employees. The way you belittle them, the way you exploit them. It's not right." He turned to Clara, his expression softening. "Clara, the money is yours. You've earned it 100 times over. Don't let anyone take it from you." Clara couldn't speak, tears welling in her eyes. She had never had anyone stand up for her like this, never had anyone affirm her worth so strongly. Vasquez, however, wasn't ready to back down. "I won't stand for this," he snarled. "I'll have you thrown out. I'll..." But again, Ronaldo interrupted him. "Go ahead," he said calmly. "Call the police. But know that if you do, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. The press, the public, they'll all hear about how you mistreat your workers, how you try to steal their hard-earned money." He looked around at the other waitresses, at the cooks peering out from the kitchen. "And something tells me I'm not the only one who would have something to say." For the first time, Vasquez looked uncertain. He glanced around, seeing the angry, determined faces of his staff. He seemed to realize that he had pushed them too far, that they wouldn't stay silent anymore. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his words lacked conviction. He turned and stalked away, slamming the door to his office. The moment he was gone, the diner erupted into cheers. The other waitresses surrounded Clara, hugging her and crying with relief. The cooks were clapping, grinning from ear to ear. And in the middle of it all was Ronaldo, smiling softly at Clara. "You deserve this," he told her again. "You deserve so much more. Never forget that." Clara couldn't find the words to thank him. But as she looked around at her coworkers, at the hope and solidarity shining in their eyes, she knew that something had changed. This wasn't just about a tip anymore. This was about standing up for what was right, about recognizing the dignity and worth in every person. And as Clara clutched the precious money to her chest, she felt a newfound strength rising within her, a determination to keep fighting, to keep dreaming, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. Because if Cristiano Ronaldo believed in her, if he saw something special in a simple waitress, then maybe, just maybe, she could believe in herself too. The next few days were a whirlwind for Clara. The story of what had happened at the diner spread like wildfire, making headlines in the local papers and even catching the attention of national news outlets. "Football star stands up for exploited waitress," the headlines read. Ronaldo's act of kindness inspires a community. Clara was overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Reporters were calling the diner, trying to get interviews with her. Customers were coming in droves, all wanting to meet the waitress who had captured Ronaldo's heart. But for Clara, the real change was happening behind the scenes. Inspired by Ronaldo's example, the other waitresses had started to speak up to demand better treatment and fair pay. They were organizing, uniting in a way they never had before. And it was working. Faced with the threat of public outcry and legal action, Vasquez had no choice but to start making changes. He raised wages, improved working conditions, and most importantly, stopped his practice of stealing tips. It was a small victory, but for Clara and her co-workers, it meant everything. For the first time, they felt like they had a voice, like they mattered. Clara, for her part, was using the money from Ronaldo's tip to do exactly what she had always dreamed of doing. She was putting it towards her brother's education, ensuring that he would have opportunities she never had. But she didn't stop there. Inspired by the change she had seen in her own workplace, Clara started reaching out to other low-wage workers in the community. She started a support group, a place where they could come together, share their experiences, and strategize for change. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, resistance from those who benefited from the status quo. But Clara refused to give up. She had seen firsthand the power of kindness, of standing up for what was right, and she was determined to pay that forward. And through it all, she kept in touch with Ronaldo. He had given her his contact information, insisting that she reach out if she ever needed anything. At first, Clara had been hesitant, not wanting to impose on his kindness further. But as her work in the community grew, she found herself turning to him more and more for advice and support. Ronaldo, for his part, was always happy to help. He was in awe of Clara's strength and determination, and he wanted to do everything he could to support her mission. He used his platform to raise awareness about the issues Clara was fighting for, speaking out about the need for fair wages and better working conditions. He even made a sizable donation to the community center where Clara's support group met, ensuring they would have the resources they needed to keep going. And slowly but surely, things started to change. Other businesses in the area started to take notice, realizing that they couldn't get away with exploiting their workers anymore. Laws were passed, protections put in place. The tide was turning. Through it all, Clara remained at the heart of the movement, a beacon of hope and resilience for all those who had been told they would never amount to anything. She knew she hadn't done it alone. She had Ronaldo to thank for setting everything in motion, for believing in her when no one else would. And she had her co-workers, her community, who had stood with her every step of the way. But as Clara looked around at the change they had wrought, the lives they had touched, she knew that this was about more than just one person. This was about the power of compassion, of standing together in the face of adversity. And as she looked to the future, Clara knew that her work was far from over. There would always be more battles to fight, more injustices to confront. But she also knew that she was ready to keep pushing, keep dreaming, keep fighting for a world where every person was treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. Because in the end, that was what Ronaldo's act of kindness had given her. Not just money, not just a moment in the spotlight, but a belief in herself and in the fundamental goodness of humanity. And that, Clara knew, was a gift beyond measure. Years passed, and the little diner where it had all begun underwent a transformation of its own. Under new management, it became a hub for the community, a place where everyone was welcome and treated with respect. Clara, who had once been a struggling waitress there, was now a frequent guest, a beloved figure who inspired all those who met her. Her brother, thanks to the education she had worked so hard to provide, had become a successful lawyer, dedicating his career to fighting for the rights of the underprivileged. And Clara herself had become a leader in her own right, a voice for the voiceless who never stopped advocating for change. She still kept in touch with Ronaldo, the two having formed an unbreakable bond over their shared commitment to making a difference. He continued to support her work in any way he could, using his influence to amplify her message. But for Clara, the true reward was in the everyday victories, the small moments of kindness and solidarity that added up to real, lasting change. It was in the smile of a single mother who had finally secured a living wage, able to provide for her children without having to work herself to the bone. It was in the tears of joy from a young man who had been given a second chance, opportunity to build a better life for himself. It was in the laughter of the children at the community center, children who now had a safe place to learn and grow and dream. These were the moments that kept Clara going, that reminded her of why she had started on this path in the first place. And as she looked back on her journey, from the struggles of her youth to the triumphs of her present, Clara knew that she wouldn't change a thing. Because every hardship, every setback had led her to where she was meant to be. A place of purpose, of hope, of unshakable belief in the power of the human spirit. A place where a simple act of kindness, a single generous tip, could set in motion a chain of events that would change the world. And for that, Clara would always be grateful.